I just went live. We're connecting. So are you ski in, ski out?
We are just across the street.
Pretty nice.
Pretty
Pretty
pretty nice.
nice.
Although when it's 22 below, we're not doing anything.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad to hear it. Well, we're getting some folks on the call. Can you see the
Oh yeah,
the
yeah, I
guest
can.
list? So this is great. All righty. Well, David Thoreson, I am so glad we're doing this. Not a lot of people I know have been to Greenland. So when it dawned on me that not only have you been to Greenland, you have sailed to Greenland. You are a member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. You are an explorer. You grew up in Iowa. I thought, my God, you're the perfect person to have a conversation with about Greenland. Um, when is the moment you first discovered that Greenland is different from anywhere else?
Well, it was soon after I'd started sailing with my friend and mentor Roger Swanson on his sailboat Cloud Nine, and I had started with him in '91 and sailed across the South Atlantic and ended up in southern South America, and then we sailed down to Antarctica. And he was an exploring sailor, and that's what I was kind of starting out to be an explorer at the time. And we sailed down to Antarctica and across the Antarctic Circle, and we got roughed up pretty good down in that area. And we were actually sitting at Palmer Station in Antarctica, and Roger had already started thinking ahead and said, "What do you think in a couple of years about sailing up to Greenland and maybe attempting the Northwest Passage?" And that's when the light bulb went off and the spark, was kind of lit, the flame. And I started studying Greenland. And so we completed that voyage and I started preparing, and in 1994, we positioned the boat up in the Canadian Maritimes, and that's when it became very real about how we would go to sail to Greenland, what the route would be through the southern um, opening between Greenland and the Canadian Maritimes, a very treacherous part of the world, sailing through icebergs and then over to the west coast of Greenland, and that happened in 1994. So
Wow.
that's when it first happened. It's been 32 years now, and Greenland has been on my mind ever since.
What's it like?
It's the most rugged place that I've ever been. About 80% of it is ice sheet, and only the edges are open for navigation. And so there's no roads in Greenland. I think there's 95 miles of roads total. And so within the communities, there's roads, so that there can be some truck transportation and that kind of stuff from the fishing ports on the water around the community and such. So once you get into these communities, there's little boat harbors where there's fishing boats, which is the biggest industry in Greenland, and you find a place there with the harbor master, and essentially you just kind of moor either next to fishing boats or maybe there's an open spot on the pier, and then you get out and kind of explore the community and meet the people and maybe get some supplies there, like some fish or something. I remember first time I went in a grocery store there. Of course, everything is either in Danish or Greenlandic. The Greenlandic language you can't even pronounce. The words are full of like Q long Q's and R's and more Q's and Kecker Tarswak, things like this. And so I was trying to shop in there, and the Danish language is not much better. And so I'd picked out some things that looked like hot dogs or something and threw them in the basket, and I was checking out, and this Danish or a Greenlandic person kind of elbows me and says, "Do you know what those are?" And I said, "I think they're hot dogs." And he says, "No, they're pig's tails."
Oh, God.
And so that's what I was getting for the crew to cook on the boat was some pig's tails. So anyway, it's a really interesting place. There's still wild old customs that are going on there that you have to be aware of because there weren't any prisons there at the time. And for instance, like a Greenlandic man can offer you his wife for the night, for instance. And if you refuse this gesture, there's an old Greenlandic custom that says that he can fight you to the death over that. And because there's no prisons or anything, if somebody kills you or commits a big crime, they just send you over to East Greenland from West Greenland because it's
Wow.
colder over there. Now, they do have one prison now in Nuuk, which is the capital. And but that's very new, just within the last years. So Nuuk is 20,000 people. There's only 56,000 people in the entire country, and most of these villages are very small. I think the second largest town is about 5,000 people, and then it goes down to there from 1,000 and into the hundreds very quickly as you work up to the north. So as I got to thinking about what Trump was suggesting about, maybe taking Greenland or invading Greenland, I was just thinking, what on earth are you going to invade? Where are you going to go? I was reminded of this old movie of the way back in the Cold War era, where the Soviets were invading the United States, and they landed in some New England, like Maine fishing town or something. And the locals just kind of invited them in for coffee and breakfast or something. And I was thinking of the Greenlandic people, and they're just going out fishing. And, in the winter, they're out with their dog teams or on snow machines or whatever, going out fishing and hunting and doing this. Like, what on earth would we do if we invaded Greenland and we're trying to occupy the country? There's nothing to do. There's no place to go. And unless you're partaking in the local culture, I'm not sure what that even means.
Well, I was hoping you had some theory, but I
Well, I do have some theories, because I don't think the villages are strategic in any way. I think that the idea would be to expand the military presence there by having more U.S. military vessels offshore in the waters, and that would be kind of the base of operations. And really, and Admiral Franken, I know, has talked about this too, maybe with you on the show, about the melting ice in the Arctic and the opening of sea lanes now where shipping can take place in the Arctic waters. And Greenland is a very, very strategic position, and I'm sure that has come up in discussions with President Trump and his military advisors, whoever they may be these days. But from the from the east side of Greenland, for instance, you could control the gate, the opening from the North Atlantic into the Arctic Ocean. And that is the area that's melting the quickest right now. The warming Atlantic waters are pushing up into the Arctic Ocean, and they're opening this wide swath of water, which then connects to what's called the Northern Sea Route. And the Northern Sea Route is what is potentially opening up over the top of Siberia. And so, in kind of an ironic twist of history, this northeastern sea route will actually be the navigable route versus the Northwest Passage, which I've attempted and accomplished a couple times. But that's a harder route for larger ships to go through with narrow
right.
channels and more ice. So Putin is pretty much in control of the Arctic right now as far as navigation. And they have, I think, 57 ice-breaking vessels up there. Most of them are nuclear powered. They are military vessels and modified military vessels that can haul freight also. And then they also now have ice-breaking cargo ships. And so these northern rivers that they use in Siberia, Russian Siberia, can haul goods, mining or fossil fuels out of these northern areas where they're already extracting, get them on ships and haul them either east-west in or out of the Arctic. And they can also control these shipping lanes. And I think what Trump is and his advisors are thinking is that if we control Greenland, we'll also have another Arctic piece to go with our Alaskan Arctic to have more control in the Arctic and have some more military presence there to control the shipping lanes. So we would control the shipping lane in from the Atlantic and also control the shipping lane in from Baffin Bay into the Northwest Passage and into Canada. So potentially Canada could not have any shipping without U.S. Allowing them into the waters. So that's really the
Interesting.
strategic portion that I'm seeing. But then the old Thule base, which has now been converted into a Space Force base, also is a monitoring area for ballistic missiles.
Hmm.
And I know that Trump wants to institute a new military operation there called Golden Dome, which would be a much more advanced satellite-driven um, missile base operation that we could shoot down other either regular ballistic missiles or hypersonic missiles that President Putin has now at his disposal. Any attack on the United States would come over Greenland
So
airspace.
here, my uninformed theory is that Putin wants to break up the NATO alliance, and this would
Yes.
be a step in that direction. But I don't know what I'm talking about. Um,
No, that's true. No, you're absolutely
didn't get that.
correct that, and you know, President Trump is having conversations with Putin. We don't know what they're talking about, and I'm sure this has come up. I mean, Putin's dream is to completely break up NATO, and any sort of advance onto Greenland or the taking of Greenland would institute a crisis with NATO and potentially a conflict that would break up NATO, and that would send the whole world into some kind of new order. And all it would take would be for us to invade Greenland, and that would be the end of NATO.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're getting some good questions in the comments, David. Can you see them, or would you like me to read you a couple?
I cannot see the questions.
Okay, so Blue Thoughts from a Red State, one of our favorite readers, is
Yes.
asking, yes,
Mhm.
is all travel to the Air Force Base by aircraft? And approximately how many are stationed there? Are those customs still really being practiced?
I believe they are still being practiced. There's about 150 U.S. military personnel there now. That is down from a high of about 6,000, if you can
Wow.
believe it, when it was the Thule Air Base, and that was post-war when the base was really established in 1951, and the Red Scare and the expansion of the Soviet Union, the Cold War and nuclear war was such a big threat. So it's been declining ever since, but it's still part of the former DO stations, which were strategically located all through the Arctic to monitor missile activity and what's going on in Russia and former Soviet Union. The base is comprised mostly of U.S. personnel, but there are also Danish personnel there because we do have a partnership with Denmark on all of this and our NATO allies. So again, the idea of invading Greenland to have more military presence is really a fallacy because we already work with Denmark and NATO in Greenland, and we have the ability to expand bases if we wish to strategically. So again, this base is active and it's part of our new Space Force. I'm not really understanding what the difference is between a Space Force base and, say, a naval base or military base. Most traffic, almost all traffic, is in from flight because it's so iced in up there most of the year, and it's very open. Like we wanted to sail up there, but there was too much ice to get into that region.
David, you just never cease to amaze me, but I cannot imagine what it must have felt like to be on a sailboat coming into that area. Can you remember what it felt like?
Yeah, especially the first time because it was a different world there. There was more ice, and this is what I write about, and my readers and some of the people will know this from my story that in 1994, when we sailed up there, this was all pre-internet, remember, and there wasn't really any communication. We were up there alone, and we were getting our information from the Danish military when we sailed up the West Coast. We met with the Danes on their military vessels and got information from the captain of the vessel, and also from local fishermen. So we were using landmarks on shore and historical data because the you know satellite data that's available now wasn't there. So when we went as far north as we could, roughly 500, 600 miles north of the Arctic Circle, there was a point of land up there called Devil's Thumb, which we observed, and I have photographs of that area. That's the old landmark that they've used for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years to designate where you can start sailing west across Baffin Bay and over toward Canada, because the fast ice, that's ice that is attached and never really moves, in the far north, splits with what's called the northern pack ice of Baffin Bay and creates an opening, a lead. And we situated ourselves north at that point, and then at some point we just went for it and sailed west toward Canada, and we split the pack ice. We could see the pack ice to the north, and we could see the pack ice to the south, and we shot right through the slot for hundreds of miles over toward Canada. It was scary and harrowing, and we could see big waves crashing in the ice and all this
Oh
kind
my
of
god.
stuff, and we just split right through it.
Oh my god, what if you got stuck? What would you do?
We probably would have lost our vessel, and it would have been a bad day at sea.
Yeah, yes, talk about an understatement. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Alright.
it was a different time, and then, when we went back in 2007, that's when, climate change was really hitting, and that's when I really went back to document climate change and what was going on with sea ice conditions, and at that point, we didn't need to go that far north. All indications was that there was no ice at all in Baffin Bay, so we had a free rein right across the bay, 600 miles over to Canada.
Wow. Okay, we're getting some more questions and
Yeah, great.
comments. John says Trump has already announced that the U.S. will withdraw all military troops from Europe by 2027. So Putin's dream of breaking up NATO is moving forward quite successfully.
Mhm.
I don't see that as a question, but a comment. Blue Thoughts from a Red State. Are you working with the environmental groups doing research there?
I am currently not in Greenland. I am working with some groups still uh, on Alaskan issues in our Alaskan Arctic and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and some international conservation groups on photography. But I keep in touch with people, friends of mine who are doing research in Greenland, like at the Nansen Institute from Norway. There's friends of mine that are actively working up there right now. And just so you understand, when I went there in 1994, there were only a few research vessels up there. When I returned in 2007 on our voyage through the Northwest Passage, there were over 70 research vessels working in Greenland, in and out of fjords, on the ice sheets, monitoring what was going on, taking measurements, and monitoring the ice fjords, how much ice is moving in and out of the fjords, whether those glaciers are calving off more ice into the ocean than they've done in the past. And so that's the type of research that's going on there right now, ice core research. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in similarities between what's going on with the Greenlandic ice sheet and what happened long ago, tens of thousands of years ago, to create the Great Lakes when the melting started happening, and the water melts, it kind of drills through the ice and goes down to the bedrock and creates a frictionless, kind of greasy space there where the weight of all the ice can just slip off and essentially sculpt out a pool of, a depressed area where the water can then fill up. That's how the Great Lakes were created. And so there's a lot of theories about all the melting that's going on with the Greenlandic ice sheet that these blue lakes that you maybe have seen some pictures of on top of the ice in Greenland are called moulins. And they have rivers attached to them. Some of them flow out to the sea. Some of them flow down into the ice and all the way down to the core, and that's and the bedrock. And that is a big discussion right now as to all this water flowing. All these rivers actually under the ice are greasing the bedrock with this flowing water and making a slippery situation where massive amounts of ice could just calve off and flow right out into the ocean, creating massive icebergs that would then melt and raise sea level.
What do you think outsiders, whether the US, China, Russia, or Europe, really understand about Greenlandic communities and what they value most? Where's the disconnect, do you think?
I don't think there's much understanding at all. Now I'm seeing a question from
Okay.
Blue Thoughts again, but um, this goes back to the communities, and two-thirds of Greenland's energy comes from renewable sources
Hmm.
already, and they're working on more. They'll probably be 100% renewable energy country going forward. Two-thirds right now comes from geothermal and also from flowing water, so hydro. So you have the combination of those two mostly right now, but they're actually working now, especially in the southern portions where there's more sun available. There's solar and there's some wind, and I assume there'll probably be some battery storage and that type of um, energy coming. There's also diesel generators in communities for backup also. And most of these Arctic communities, whether it's in Greenland or in the U.S. Arctic, have diesel generator backup
Hmm.
running their communities.
In terms of minerals and things that might be of value, is there anything there that would prompt a superpower like the United States to wanna grab it?
Yes, this is really one of the three sort of most important issues I think that we need to be looking at right now because China controls all of the rare earth right now. I mean, 90% anyway. Essentially, they got that market cornered. And Greenland has 25 of the essential rare earth elements there in Greenland. That's factual. We know that drilling and coring and all this kind of stuff has shown that the rare earths are there. Now, the problem with Greenland versus other areas of the world is, as I explained earlier, there's only 95 miles of roads in the country. And so, depending on where these rare earth elements are located, there may be no access to these resources. Now, the melting, because of climate change and global warming, is opening up access to some of these resources, but there still is not the infrastructure to extract them and get them out of the country. So where they're looking are in these fjords and around these areas where shipping, where you can get, like a deep water port established and some facilities there so that you could maybe build a road to a mine that's maybe 20 miles out of the fjord down to the fjord area where you could load the minerals onto a ship to get them to an area where the minerals could be processed. This is not a short-term venture. This is something that would take, you know, 10 years, 20 decades to develop. It's not gonna happen overnight. And so, again, invading Greenland, for this type of thing is a ridiculous notion because we already have US companies working in Greenland. exploring for minerals and rare earth right now. And one area where this is happening, and if any of the listeners want to look this up, look in the Disco Island area. And I think the community is called Julianhop, and there are U.S. mining companies and Australian mining companies working there right now to develop a mine where there's some rare earth materials going on right now. That's going to be kind of the first one I think that will develop, and it's further south, and that's where most of the early stuff's going to develop because the northern areas are still inhospitable and not really there to develop yet because of the harsh elements and the lack of infrastructure.
Let me let me just welcome the folks that have joined us in the last few minutes. We're chatting with David Thoreson, who's a member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative, an explorer, environmental climate chronologer. I guess I'll just describe you that way. His column is absolutely fascinating. If you're interested in the environment, if you're interested in exploring, sailing, please take a look at David's column. Is it davidthoreson.substack.com, David?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And
Marge
then
Nelson. Yeah.
it's also linked to 3 Degrees podcast too. So
Yes.
both of those where we talk about some of these issues too with Chris Cloninger,
Yes.
the
Yes.
climate
Yes.
scientist. Yeah.
He's also a member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative.
Yes.
Fabulous meteorologist who used to work for KCCI here in the Des Moines metro area. Um, Marge Nelson had a question about your sailing vessel. So take us on board. What size was it? Is it? Cloud9 is still in operation.
Yeah. Cloud9. It's interesting. Roger Swanson passed away now, unfortunately, um, about a decade ago, but his boat has been sold a few times and is now still operating. I haven't met the new owners or captain, but it's now a mobile missionary vessel operating in the South Pacific,
Ah,
sailing to different islands and I guess working with local communities and helping them out as I can with the Christian mission. So that's an interesting new mission for Cloud9. But Cloud9 was one of the most famous um, ocean sailing, voyaging, and exploring vessels in the world. Roger sailed over 220,000 miles on the vessel. She
wow.
was well known in every port in the world. Any place you would go, people would know Cloud9. And so I was fortunate to sail almost 50,000 miles with Roger over the course of 16 years on 11 different voyages, some more fun, exploring different parts of the world, and some that were very, very intense, like my times in the Northwest Passage and Greenland and down around Cape Horn and Antarctica and some of those times we had on board. Cloud9's a 57-foot fiberglass vessel, not
Ah,
built for polar sailing, and was actually built for the Cape Town to Rio race by a South African physician who was trying to escape apartheid, and so the boat was because you couldn't take South African money out of the country at the time. He built a boat there and then had it sailed out of the country on the race and then ended up in the islands. And then he sold it and left the country. And that's where Roger found the boat after the race was in the islands of the Caribbean and bought it there and then sailed the world for the rest of his life. I did sail on back to an earlier question about scientific voyages and research, I sailed on another vessel named Ocean Watch, and that was actually a NOAA weather ship. And I was the photographer and videographer on that voyage. We did a 28,000-mile circumnavigation. I was at sea for 400 days circumnavigating the North and South American continents. And so we had a notion, NOAA oceanographer. That was almost a new word, notionographer. Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah, we had different scientists on board, and we had a National Science Foundation mission and educators with us on that voyage for a whole ocean and sea awareness program that we did. And actually, there's a new vessel out there right now called One Ocean that has been recreating our voyage and doing research along the way. Also, you can look up One Island, One Ocean, or One Ocean. You'll find it. You can follow the route that they're on right now. So that all continues, and I continue being active with others that and scientists and institutions that are doing research, and I use data from these other institutions and scientists that I know that are working out in the field to continue what I'm doing with my mission of kind of trying to spread the understanding of climate change and what's happening, especially in the polar regions of the world and how they're changing so quickly, affecting things like the current polar vortex that's happening. And that's all connected to loss of sea ice in the Arctic.
Let's talk about that a little bit before we wrap up here. But I also want to go back to living aboard
Mhm.
a sailing vessel. But you are in Colorado right now,
Yes.
experiencing what, 18 degrees below zero?
I have a weather station right behind you. You can actually see it in the lower
Yeah,
corner. Right
yeah.
now, it's 22.9 below zero.
And that is not wind chill. That
That's
is.
without wind chill right now. Yes.
So tell me from a climate perspective what that says to you.
Well, we have these outbreaks from time to time, and uh, people go crazy about this whole term polar vortex, and you see a lot of chatter on social media about it all, and then you'll see the climate deniers, including President Trump, who just on his Truth Social said, "Whatever happened to global warming? You know, we have
Ah,
this record cold and all that stuff going on." So that's pretty common way to refute climate change and the warming. But the Arctic Ocean has now lost over 60% of its ice. You think of our northern polar ice cap. I mean, come on. We've lost 60% of our ice just in the last 50 years. And so there's more open water up there, and there's more open water year round because that ice is mostly first year ice now. It's like a lake that freezes, Lake Okoboji, where I'm from. You know, it freezes in the winter, it's open in the summer. And that's what's happening more in the Arctic right now. And the sea lanes that I pointed out, especially the Atlantic side, has more open water in it all the way up into the Arctic. Even right now, it's not iced over. So this warming water is affecting the normal circumpolar jet stream or this polar vortex, which normally flows in a very smooth circular pattern around the polar region. And so now with this warmer air getting up into the jet stream, it's affecting this pattern and causing what's called a wobble of the jet stream. And this wobble creates, instead of a circular pattern, a dip in the jet stream, which leaks this cold air out into the northern hemisphere. So we get these cold outbreaks way down into Texas, or last year it snowed in Pensacola, you know, and the Florida Gulf, and I think New Orleans and Louisiana had snow, and we're having these horrible ice storms way down in Texas that knocks out the power grid. This is just a normal part of the warming that's going on in the rest of the world and other regions that's affecting us here. And that's why no one is immune in the planet from what's happening to global climate change in other areas like the Arctic.
couple good questions here. One from Jason Wolfsmith, another member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative, who, by the way, if those of you on this call listening are fascinated by what we're doing with the Iowa Writers Collaborative, Jason and Bob Leonard have been doing some joint series that are absolutely fascinating, most
Yeah.
recently about women who have been incarcerated. and absolutely fabulous stories being told by Jason and Bob Leonard. But Jason's question is, what's your response to people who say climate change is real, but is not human caused?
Well, I climate change is, I think, the hardest thing to explain, and it's the most difficult issue I think we're facing right now because you can't just look outside and say, "Oh, there it is." You can't look up into the sky and say, "Oh, I can tell it's happening in the atmosphere." Well, you can now a little bit more because a lot of times you can look up and you see wildfire smoke, for instance, that we've never had before in Iowa and all through the upper Midwest, where we're actually having air quality uh, alerts and hazards all through the summer now from Canadian wildfires that are going on. This is new. The other thing that I equate it to, and this goes back to my interest and a lot of interest right now in Iowa, you can look into the water and understand that our waters are damaged either through algae outbreaks, toxic algae, or just silted in lakes and rivers and such. This is a human connection. This is caused by man. It's affecting our waters. So, in the same way, we're affecting our climate. All the fossil fuels, all the turbulences caused from big major developments and construction sites and such. This industrial soot and dust and waste is going up into the atmosphere. It's being carried into the Arctic and being deposited as black soot onto ice and turning it dark, like in Greenland. And this dark ice absorbs more of the sun's energy as heat and melts more water. These are things that you can see. And so I like to equate things that you can see to the public, like plastics in the ocean that are causing so many problems and fouled waters. So we know humans are doing this and you can see it. And in that respect, even though you can't see what's going on with the climate, you can see the effects all around the world of what's taking place. So it's a hard concept to explain. Scientists are really working hard at their communication skills because charts and graphs just don't cut it anymore. And so it's a big, big challenge. But I think what people are starting to see more now is how it's affecting their lives in storms that are becoming stronger. We call that rapid intensification. So, say southern hurricanes might be coming in as a Cat 1 or 2, and they get over this record warm, superheated ocean water in, what are we calling it now? The Gulf of America or Mexico or Gulf of Trump? Um, anyway, our waters are getting warmer, and that's fuel for hurricanes. And so we're seeing stronger hurricanes that are going more inland and raining up to 30, 40, 50 inches and causing all these problems. So stronger storms, people are seeing the damage. We have a $1 billion storm happening every 2.5 weeks on average now in the United States. People are seeing it. They're
Wow.
seeing it, and their insurance rates are going up. Certainly, insurance companies understand climate change clearly, and everybody's insurance rates are going up now because of climate change and these $1 billion storms that are happening constantly across the United States. So, um, I also say to people who are deniers that you know, there's also this theory called gravity. And if you want to test out theories, because climate change is a proven scientific theory, I suggest that you maybe go up to the top of a 20-story building and jump off and test the theory of gravity and see if that is something that's real. So theories are real. They're proven. Climate change is real. It's proven. There's a consensus worldwide. And if people want to test other theories, I challenge them to do so physically.
Chris Gonier and I have had conversations about how frustrating it is for those of you who are in this genre. I don't know what we call it, but this scientific study of climate, and how frustrating it is that it is not a topic. This existential threat to the planet is not a topic politicians talk about, and you talk to a political consultant and say, "Oh, nobody really wants to hear about it. Nobody wants to deal with it. We gotta stick to economic, what's in it for you tomorrow kinda stuff." How do you how do you stand that?
I don't stand it very well, and it's extremely frustrating. And this goes back to what I just wrote about Greenland and also some of the things I've been posting about our Arctic, like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And we don't have any understanding in the lower 48 that we're an Arctic nation already. And there are people living in communities in the far north, in Alaska. We have indigenous people living in over 40, 50 communities within the Arctic, and they're seeing their lives turned upside down by this right now with horrible storms that are happening up there and melting of ice and permafrost that's tearing their roads apart and dropping their houses into the sea and destroying their communities and causing hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to infrastructure that's adding up, that are showing us and demonstrating to us what the future is looking like, because what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. And so that's why this is so frustrating. These people are telling stories about what's happening right now in the far north and warning us as to what's going to be happening to us as the climate continues to change. And so by failing to heed these warnings from real people and what's happening with animals, with migrations and how these are changing in the north, through this kind of storytelling of people and animals and these changes in communities, I think is an effective way to talk about it with people who don't really understand, because they're not seeing it so much in their own lives in the lower 48. So I think Greenland being such a vast Arctic wilderness and our northern Alaskan Arctic wilderness are very similar in so many ways, and that people want to exploit those areas right now because resources are becoming more available. But that puts you, again, like head to head with local communities, with environmental groups, with scientists and researchers. They're saying we can't develop these areas. We can't take more fossil fuels and add to climate change, because all it does is continue the cycle of damage, not only to the local regions and peoples, but to the entire world. And so I don't know how you can sound the alarm or the message any more than so many people are doing. There's just very large forces that we're up against. The most powerful and wealthiest corporations that have ever been around in the history of the world that we're up against, that have very hard messaging and a lot of money to buy off politicians, and it's just a hard one. And hopefully, hopefully we can just keep making inroads in that, and the storms aren't going away, and soon one's going to hit Mar-a-Lago.
Absolutely. Susan Beckman has one more really good question, I if we have time, how concerned are you with the integrity of data under the current backlash against science, research, and the work of organizations like NOAA?
This is one of the great issues of our times, and the data is endangered. That's for sure. These websites now have been wiped clean, and when you go to climatechange.gov, you won't see any discussion of climate change there anymore. In fact, you'll see climate denial now information being infused into these government websites. It's an absolute tragedy. Now, there's outside groups that have worked to preserve this data and store it on secure servers off of government websites. So that's one good thing that has happened. The data is preserved. It's sort of in a secure digital vault right now. and it's sitting there waiting for a time when it can go back up on public government websites when this period of time that we're in right now comes to an end, whenever that may be. It will come to an end.
Marge Nelson wants to know if you're coming to the Okoboji Writers Retreat again this year.
Absolutely, I'll be at the Okoboji Writers Retreat, and I'll be telling more stories. And I know last year I got a lot of great feedback from my storytelling there, and I'll be doing more of that. And I know a lot of people are interested in what it's like to live a life at sea and what it's like to be on a boat, and I'll be talking more about that. And there's a good chance I'll be doing more sailing this year. I've been sailing on a boat called Polar Sun that I've written about. It's a National Geographic sailing vessel that I'm continuing on a circumnavigation right now for the next 3 or 4 years with Mark Sinnott, the owner captain and actually New York Times bestselling author. So you can go back into my previous posts where I joined them in 2022 in the Arctic and helped rescue the National Geographic voyage as they were trapped in the ice in the Northwest Passage and helped them get out of there. So it's been quite a wild run. And I am getting back working with the Alaska Wilderness League now also, and I may be back up in our Arctic and the Canadian Arctic, embedding into villages up there and working with some of the Gwich'in people and native hunters up there in their communities, following the porcupine caribou and what's happening with climate change in these regions and new threats to extraction in the north.
David, one thing that strikes me as we have this conversation, I knew you would have this would be an interesting conversation, but it also underscores to me the depth of your knowledge, the breadth of your knowledge. How do we how do we as a society get more emerging journalists to write about these issues? It's a problem because legacy media is so driven by metrics to service advertisers. We have 70 people on this call. We'll probably get a few thousand to watch this video after I upload it, but it's still a topic. Thank God for Substack that we
Yeah.
can do these kinds of things without worrying about advertising dollars, without worrying about metrics, that sort of thing. But how do we get more people writing about this?
Well, there's dozens, maybe hundreds of writers writing about climate change on Substack. So, and oftentimes, I don't even know how it pops up. Maybe you know this, Julie, but I'll get a message that I'm number 34 in climate and environment or something like that.
Mhm.
And so I look at the list and I go through the list, and many of the writers I'm subscribed to and I follow what they're doing. So that's a good thing. But within the list, I've also noticed that there's a big climate denial community now on Substack, just like there are on other social media sites. In fact, I'm sort of in, I don't know, I wouldn't say conflict, but I I do get it on my feed. I get it from other writers. One, I just posted a note that you can see in my feed just I think yesterday from Dr. Matthew Walicki, who is a paid climate denialist through many conservative sources like the Heartland Institute that he works with, which is a Koch brothers sort of affiliated thing. So there's a lot of dark money that's flowing into writers and into sources that post things that compete with writers like me and others who are trying to spread the word and stories and research from real science and telling stories about what's going on. So that inhibits, I think, people from writing too, because when you speak, you get attacked. You know, look at what happened to Chris Cloninger. So uh, that's part of the problem right now. I think Chris Jones is feeling it when he's running for, Secretary of Agriculture, and he's just being attacked from all sides from the ag community as being, hateful toward farmers. And none of us who are speaking out about the environment, hate or want to disturb what's going on with business and commerce and things. We just would like to see businesses, industries, um, just be better players in society with not causing harmful pollution that damages human health or that damages the global environment. And I I think that the younger generation has a great opportunity right now with things like TikTok and doing real interesting, catchy kind of videos and things that people can look at because there's so much news. The young people get most of their news from TikTok now, so which is scary to me. But, that's what's happening. We're being more fragmented as major news sources, especially those that have been taken over by, billionaires, just produce less quality media. So that's why Substack is so important right now for all of us who are on there writing about the environment and climate. It's just absolutely so important to be communicating about the environment, but also people writing about I've seen some questions write about the insurance industry and what's going on there. These are great stories for people to be writing about. Why is the conservative insurance industry so into the reality and the factual information about what's happening with climate change? Because they're seeing it affect their industry and they're taking such huge losses. And so these are very interesting stories for people to be pursuing, whether you're just a journalist that doesn't cover the environment or not. Pursue these avenues and really look at what's happening. I think they're great stories.
Tej Dwan is on the chat here, and he too is a member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. He's
Hi,
an
Tesh.
angel.
He's a
He's a
friend.
is he a friend? Okay,
Oh,
good.
yeah.
He asked. I should be wrapping this up, but he asked a really good question. If you could build a data store as part of the Iowa Writers Collaborative, what do you want to collect, and would you like to collaborate? And to grow that question a little more, have you considered creating your own climate collaborative like we do with Iowa, but you've put together a roundup of columns that you publish periodically that people who are interested in this topic can find other writers?
I think that's a great question, and it is actually something that I have thought about. I've thought about it both because there's two sides to this, yes, within the collaborative and also with outside of that. I've been working on for a decade now what's called the Iowa State Climate Assessment. And it's it's something that other states have done, and there's been a national climate assessment done. This is something we need to have done in the state of Iowa, and that would be a database that would be accessible to everyone in the state of Iowa. There's a lot of sources, there's a lot of scientists at various universities, institutions across the state that I've been working with on this, and I think the stories that have been written and things that have been published over the last 10 years or so that have to do with climate and the environment, whether it's water quality or climate data itself, are so important to get into this database, but also human stories. Getting out and interviewing farmers that can talk about the changes that they're seeing in weather patterns and how that's affecting their time in their fields, or are they seeing more drought? Are they seeing more flooding? What's happening? Collecting these human stories is so important along with the science. So I think the people that what is the tech the tech side of the Iowa writers? There's a tech group that's writing together as kind of an inner
Oh,
circle.
as part of the business circle? Yeah,
Yeah, I think that
Tish
would be. Yeah, I think that would be a good group to, collaborate with that could maybe help some of us who are writing and have knowledge, and contact with some of these outside sources like scientists and universities to maybe help with the data and collecting some of these stories might be a really good collaboration.
If somebody is listening to this and wants to, explore ideas with you, are you open to them reaching out?
Absolutely. Yeah, please.
Okay. So do you wanna leave your email address or
Yeah,
contact
sure.
information?
Um, for this one, I would like people because it's specific to climate change to, if they want to email me, they can email me at protectthearctic@gmail.com. And,
Okay.
that's where I mostly collect, my, scientist friends and people that are interested in these issues. So protectthearctic@gmail.com.
Thank you, David. This has been a fascinating conversation. I knew it would be, but you've exceeded my expectations. Thank you
Well,
so
thank you.
much.
It was so fun to put this together quickly, Julie, and I hope everybody's interested. And now I'll keep posting and following up on this conversation and what we discussed in Greenland and the Arctic today.
Great. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
So how do I get out of here? I don't know. Here we go.